I love horror. It's one of those genres that just has infinite potential and allows for creativity to really stride. I can't think of any other genre that has pieces of media in it, but being so vastly different in presentation, style, and subject matter. So with Halloween just around the corner, I want to talk about some of my favorite horror pieces of media. I read a lot of manga, and I feel like horror manga is just something that's never really clicked for me. The biggest issue I see is that a lot of horror manga focus on the art too much rather than the situations or the scenarios. A lot of times I find that they're really focused on just the gore aspects, like an example is Pumpkin Night, where the manga is so focused solely on the visceral gore of it all that I just really could not get into it. A lot of it just boiled down to, oh my god, look at her eyeball just got scooped out, or this or that happened to this character, and holy shit, that's so fucking disgusting. That's not to say body horror is bad, because things like Frankensteins work for me really well. Personally speaking, I'll always be more drawn into a personal character-driven story. So this webtoon here is something that I've been wanting to talk about forever because it's one of my favorite stories ever. Bastard follows the story of our main character, Jin, who we are introduced by having him thrown off of a building in the first chapter, just as a tone setter for what this story is going to be like. Due to this accident, he is left crippled with multiple pins and metal plates left in his arms and artificial valves in his heart. Our story further escalates as the girl that Jin likes becomes a target by a serial killer, and the serial killer is Jin's father. For years, Jin has been used as an accomplice and a tool to allow his father to carry out murders of innocent and unsuspecting women. One of the things that's so amazing about this webtoon and really carries it is how amazing the art is, how expressive characters are. The dread people feel is just tangible. If you've watched videos like Super Eye Patch Wolf's looks at Junji Ito's stories, and he talks about Ito's use of the page turn technique to further instill dread into the readers of the uncertainty of what's to come. Bastard makes use of that in a similar way. Since you're most likely going to be reading this on a phone using the webtoon app, all the pages are placed vertically, so it uses what I'm going to coin as the page scroll. If you've read a lot of webtoons, you've probably noticed that there's huge spaces of just void between actual pages and drawings in the webtoons. Personally speaking, I really don't like them. I feel like they're just a way to spread out pages in a lot of cases, or just transition between scenes because the author doesn't know how to, but Bastard uses these magnificently. My favorite is when they do it with reaction shots. Usually it'll be a character is seeing something happening, then it will go from one panel of their face to another panel of them seeing more and more horrified, and then there will be some space, and then it'll be what they're looking at. And every time I just find it super effective. Another aspect that I really love is how impossible the situation feels for Jin at times. He's just so outmatched because of his physical disabilities that he'll never be able to face his father head on, that he has to be creative and think his way out of these situations. While he's no Joseph Joestar, he does come up with some clever ideas to buy himself some time. I've been sitting on this recommendation for a while, and I'm finally glad to be able to talk about it. Originally, it was just going to be this as its own video, but I really don't want to get too much into spoilers for this. I just say, go read it. It's fantastic. It's all in English now. I was so hooked on this that I went and read the Korean scans before it was fully out in English, and had one of my friends who spoke Korean translate it to me. If you're really into thrillers, then this is absolutely a must-read. Next on the list is some video games. Now, I could take the easy route and just recommend Resident Evil 2 Remake because it's honestly fantastic, but let's talk about some indie games for once. I was on Twitter recently and I saw a thread talking about indie devs posting some screenshots of their games, and there was one in that thread that really caught my eye. A little game called Tamashii, a puzzle platformer inspired by Japanese games from the 90s and 80s. This game's art style is phenomenal. It's what really caught my eye. It's just so fucking cool. I love things with this aesthetic. It's part Lovecraft, part Geiger. I have no idea what the games that the developer said they were inspired by are, but I would love to check them out if they're anything similar to this style of aesthetic. Now for the gameplay, it's a simple puzzle platformer. You have the ability to place 3 clones and you have to get from one room to the other, and then there's a boss battle at the end of a dungeon. If you're a puzzle game fanatic, then this will probably be really easy and disappointing to you maybe, but as someone who sucks at them, like me, and I don't really play many puzzle games, I really enjoyed it. The character designs are super interesting, and the game is really cheap. It's only $4 on Steam, and it's on sale right now on itch.io. The other game I want to talk about here is Dead End Road, a small procedurally generated indie horror racing game. Now you may be wondering, how do you make a horror game where you spend all of it in a car? Well, in Dead End Road, you activate a ritual to grant you one wish, but it ends up backfiring because it comes with a heavy cost. So now you must get into your car and drive all the way to Dead End Road. The map itself has an actual design to it, but the roads in between each town are procedurally generated with different things that can happen to you. The visuals are very PS1 inspired, similar to games like Power Drill Massacre or Babysitter Bloodbath. That's what originally sold me on this game and got me interested in trying it out because I love the PS1 aesthetic, which I fear will probably become overused in just a year or two. But each time you stop at a town, you're able to go to a pharmacy to heal your sanity, a repair shop to fix your car in case you hit anything, and refuel your gas, along with going to a pawn shop to buy items, which may have special effects to do things later on. One of my favorite little things about this game is that when you're driving, you could run into hitchhikers on the road and you could stop and they'll actually get into your car, which could possibly trigger different events to happen. Overall, it's a pretty simplistic, procedurally generated horror game that you could get for $3 on Steam. I think it's worth the money. I think it's really cool. It's a neat little game. You're not going to be probably blown away by it, but it's still worth your time. The first movie on this list is Calibre, a Netflix thriller horror movie that came out a few years ago. If I had to describe this movie without spoiling anything, it is a movie where things just keep getting worse. It's shit's fucked, the movie. Like all horrible vacations that turn into nightmares, two guys decide to go hunting in bumfuck nowhere Scotland. If I wanted bad things to ever happen to me and just disappear forever and never would be heard from again, I would just go to bumfuck nowhere Europe, because I'm most likely going to be killed by something there. It's really hard to talk about this movie without spoiling the big plot points that happen, so I don't want you to watch any trailers. Just watch the movie, and if by the 30-minute mark it hasn't grabbed you, turn it off. But the one feeling that you will most likely feel during this movie is anxiety and the extreme tension in the room and tons of scenes. The next movie I'm going to talk about is The Ritual, another Netflix horror movie. Once again, it's guys going on vacation in middle of nowhere Europe. I believe this time it's between Sweden or Norway, something like that. I really can't remember. But they're hiking in the mountains and then a storm comes and they're like, fuck, it'd be faster to cut through these woods. And if I was there, I'd be like, fuck that, dude. I'm never, ever doing that. That's just signing my death certificate. Around the last 30 to 40 minutes, the movie kind of becomes a different type of horror movie, and you're going to either really enjoy that or it's going to lose you and you wish you went back to what it was. I'm on the fence because I liked both parts of this movie, but after my first viewing I couldn't help but feeling I wished it stayed to how it originally was. But I don't think it completely falls apart once it changes to the other style. It's going to be up to you, the viewer, to determine whether you like this shift or not. The next horror film I'm going to recommend has a few caveats with it, because while I like it and enjoyed watching the film, I can see as a critic that this is not the best film, and especially not something that's completely 100% recommendable. The third film is Frankensteins Army, a 2013 indie horror found footage film that takes place during World War II. Now right off the bat, I know people are going to roll their eyes at found footage, and I do think that some of the scenes in this movie are really hurt from the fact that this is found footage. Along with that, a lot of the acting is really rough, to the point where it's comical in some scenes. But what really carried this film for me is the monster designs. The monster designs and practical effects are fucking phenomenal in this movie. It's pretty much the sole reason of why I'm recommending it, because even if it is kind of a bad movie, I think that the designs are so unique that it's worth checking out for them alone. So the premise is a bunch of Russian soldiers during World War II run into a village, and soon enough they find themselves being attacked by monsters, which turn out to just be Nazi soldiers that have been experimented on by Dr. Frankenstein. They have this wonderful mad scientist aesthetic to them, where it's like, here's some bullshit strapped to this guy. This one over here, he's just got a plain propeller for a torso. Some of the designs remind me of background robots you'd see in the early Star Wars films. If you're not going to watch all of these films, then I would say this is probably the one you would skip if you're just trying to see something really enjoyable, because I do think there are some dull moments in this. The final movie I want to talk about is another low-budget horror film, Dog Soldiers, a 2002 military werewolf movie, where a bunch of UK soldiers are on a training expedition and then they get attacked by werewolves. It's one of those movies that's an extremely simple premise that's just executed really well. As an American, I love watching movies that have a lot of British banter, and this movie has a really likable cast. I don't know what it is that I find irresistibly charming about low-budget horror films. I think it might be art versus adversity, because despite this movie allegedly having a $2 million estimated budget according to IMDb, gun sound effects are really crunchy and satisfying to hear. The guns kick up tons of smoke, which you rarely see in a lot of movies nowadays. The practical effects are great. The wolf costumes look awesome. Like, you can clearly tell this is probably what most of their money went to, was to the werewolves. The only complaint I really have with the movie is just some of the really weird cuts that it has, where it'll just occasionally either just crossfade into the next scene or fade to black and then fade right back in. I assume this is probably because this is a straight-to-TV movie. Overall, it's a solid film, and there's not a lot of really good werewolf movies, so if you're a fan of monster movies, then I think it's absolutely worth checking out. My final recommendation for this video is a TV show, Ash vs. the Evil Dead. Now, I really like the original movies, and when I heard that this was getting made, I was really worried at first, thinking this was just going to be a soulless cash grab. So I avoided it until recently, and I watched it, and I loved it. I just had fun from start to finish. It's like if Dante from DMC got fat and was a has-been and a drunk, and he had dentures, and everybody's sick of him, and nobody finds his jokes funny anymore, but he keeps saying the one-liners, so it's kind of already like DMC5 in a way, and he has to fight the Necronomicon again. The effects and costumes and monster designs in the show are really good. The first few episodes are a little rough. The CG in them just looks really bad. Like the first episode where Ash is fighting the dolls in the convenience store, those just look hilariously terrible. My favorite thing about this show is after a while you'll start to notice that characters are absolutely filthy at the end of scenes, like they're just covered in tons of blood or shit in some cases, and then the scene will transition and they'll be perfectly clean, and that's because they're going to be exploded on by a dead body or something in the next scene when they have to fight a new monster, and every time it's hilarious. The biggest criticism I could think of off the top of my head is that occasionally some of the running gags just got really worn out and overused by the end of the show, but other than that, everybody's bringing their A game. It's great to see Bruce Campbell back as Ash, and I enjoyed this far more than the remake from a few years ago. If you're a fan of the original films, then this is absolutely a must-watch. If you made it this far in the video, I just want to say thanks for watching. I know this isn't that much of substance for a recommendation video, but most of these are really reliant on not being spoiled on the events of what happened, so there was not really a whole lot to talk about while going around major plot points. If you enjoyed the video on my channel, maybe consider becoming a patron on Patreon. Also, just sharing around the videos helps out the channel a lot. Now, my next video is finally going to be the GX video. Everybody can rejoice. I know everybody keeps asking, and I keep saying at the end of every video, but I guess no one watches to the end of going, where's the GX video? It's going to be soon. As always, thanks for watching, and see you.